Coming up ahead in this episode of Xtalks Spotlight.
You can get faster decisions through more intense monitoring using digital measures. And so that can help you get a faster internal decision. It also helps you kind of, as I say, start to build that patient-centric case and understand what kind of evidence might be meaningful to patients and start to kind of pilot those elements of your protocol.
Hello, and welcome to Xtalks Spotlight, illuminating insights from subject matter experts and industry thought leaders. I'm Sonia Hunt. In this episode, we're asking the question, why should companies use digital endpoints across clinical development?
Clinical trials are broken. High costs of $1 to $2 billion, long timelines of 5 to 10 years, and success rates below 10% create an environment that prevents drugs from reaching patients. VivoSense is passionate about improving clinical trial efficiency and efficacy with the validated and verified use of digital health technologies, also known as DHTs. In this Xtalks Spotlight edition, I sat down with Dr. Ieuan Clay, Director of Science at VivoSense, to learn about the benefits of deploying improved measures derived from DHTs in clinical trials. Well, thank you for taking the time for this Spotlight interview, Ieuan.
No problem. Thanks for the invitation.
So to start us off, let's get right to the heart of the matter. Why do you think sponsors should consider using digital endpoints from wearable sensors to improve clinical trials?
It's a great question. So I think a lot of people are thinking about digital endpoints because they're trying to augment the available tools that we have. Everybody's trying to create a holistic chain of evidence that connects what's happening on a physiological level through to what a patient is actually perceiving. And we're just not very well catered for by existing tools. A lot of them are very intermittent and not particularly performant. They're typically collected at hospital visits as part of a clinical trial. And that can be up to, 3 months apart in time. And that just doesn't give us a very good picture of what's actually happening in a patient's lived experience. And this is particularly true in oncology or neurological conditions or even rare diseases where progression of those conditions can be very slow and the trials are very long. And this means that, as I said, we get quite a poor picture of how those diseases are progressing with existing tools like PROs or biomarker samples. And so we believe that digital measures really helps fill that gap by giving an objective and a real world picture of what's happening in that patient's life. We also believe that a lot of these technologies are increasingly integrated into in everybody's lives, and so the data that we're getting back from it can also be a great contributor to improving patient engagement and centricity. New evidence tools can help us not just plug gaps in a chain of evidence, but also introduce more elements into that evidence plan that are central to quality of life. It helps us assess things that are very meaningful to patients, like their independence, their sleep, their physical function. And this is very much supported by regulatory bodies like the FDA, who've, really over the last couple of years have made very, very clear, through things like the patient-focused drug development programs, that if you're going to be thinking about regulatory communication with the evidence that you're collecting in your trials, you have to have this meaningful patient-centric aspect. And so we really believe that digital measures are very important in that aspect. And I think one thing I would also add to it, there is also a purely economic argument, and there's now a really solid body of evidence that shows that adding these objective real-world measures into a clinical trial can allow for things like smaller sample sizes, shorter trials, various increases in efficiency like faster go/no-go decisions. Even just in the last half a year or so, we've seen some really great papers coming out from people like Christina Duran from Evinova, or Jonas Doorn from Roche. They both published in very highly regarded peer-reviewed journals that they are seeing, reductions in sample size just through introducing these tools.
Now, is there a specific phase in drug development where DHTs should be used?
I mean, we think that there's a case for digital measures in all phases of clinical trials, but of course, there's different reasons why you think about incorporating a digital measure into different stages. I mean, obviously, phase one, it's all about safety. And there again, this aspect of real-world objective monitoring, really helps you discover things like adverse events or safety signals that might be missed through, let's say, a questionnaire-based approach or biosampling. Again, in phase two, as I just mentioned, there's several examples now where you can get faster decisions through more intense monitoring using digital measures. And so that can help you get a faster internal decision. It also helps you kind of, as I say, start to build that patient-centric case and understand what kind of evidence might be meaningful to patients and start to kind of pilot those elements of your protocol. And then moving into phase three, obviously, again, the real world aspects, the meaningful aspects, these are, as well as, supporting market authorization, also is going to build into your integrated evidence plan, and support label claims and differentiation on the market. I think these quality of life relevant evidence tools are increasingly being incorporated into clinical trials at phase two and phase three to support what comes later then in phase four on the market. And again, in phase four, clearly that kind of, objective real world evidence, is going to be a big part of your strategy there. And for all of these aspects, digital measures can help you get that kind of evidence.
And when considering DHTs, what are the practical considerations that should be kept in mind?
Yeah, I mean, this is a real challenge, and it really requires that specialist knowledge. It is a whole new field of evidence tools. And, we at VivoSense, we don't prescribe a sort of one size fits all approach. It's very much about what are you trying to achieve in your particular program or with your portfolio. And so one of the things that is very important to us is that early engagement. Again, it may well be that you are, looking at something that's more mature, more established, and, you can move faster towards implementation, but it may also be that, you really want to develop a completely novel tool, in which case that early development is going to be critical in working out exactly what you want to be measuring. So using the measures that matter framework, but then also working out how you're going to implement it. And if you're only engaging, immediately before study launch, that doesn't leave us with the required runway that we need to really explore that novel tool in its full extent. We also, as I say, think that it's not just what you are measuring, but also how are you measuring it. And again, this is a critical consideration of making sure that you're getting that symptom to sensor mapping correct, that you're really implementing a technology that can measure the measurable concept that you're interested in, but also do it in a way that's acceptable to the patients in the study. In many conditions, they're already very highly burdened by their condition. And so it's important that those form factor aspects are also included in your decision making. And as I mentioned, it may be that, for example, the tool that you are looking for, the measurable concept or meaningful aspects of health, and that patient group consider meaningful, have actually not really been well articulated. And so you may actually need to invest into some of that more foundational work up front to really understand what you should be measuring before you start implementing it into your protocols. And this is really critical then for the later discussions with regulators who are going to want to see a justification of why the evidence tools that you selected for your protocol were selected. And that's something that we, are routinely incorporating now into both our internal research, but also into work that we're doing with our clients, because they really see a lot of value in facilitating those regulatory discussions and making sure that the evidence package that they get at the end of the trial is really regulatory ready.
And finally, looking forward to the future, where do you think the industry is headed, and what is the adoption goal?
I think, we're really at an interesting point in the field right now. We've had a lot of investment, and we're starting to see the fruits of that labor now. We've seen a real convergence around messaging and support from regulatory bodies like the FDA and EMA. We've seen, the first fully qualified digital measure. We've seen a number of acceptances recently as primary or co-primary, including some of our own work in Rett syndrome. We're also seeing a lot of, frameworks being established and very broadly accepted from groups like the Digital Medicine Society, CITI, the FNIH. They've done a lot of the foundational work to establish what is required to actually demonstrate, for example, that a digital measure is fit for purpose and ready to be put into an interventional trial. From our perspective, one of the most important frameworks has been the Measures That Matter framework. This is a really, really important paper for us that we cite and use all the time in our work. And as I say, that convergence from patient advocacy groups, regulators, and now increasingly sponsors and developers around understanding how do we articulate and discover what is actually really meaningful to patients in their lived experience, and then how to then select measures and tools that help us assess those meaningful aspects. That convergence has really, I think, caused quite a sea change in the field in the last couple of years, and I think it's very, very positive. I think from my personal perspective, I also feel that the evolution of technologies has also really stepped up in the last year, and we're starting to see, for example, a lot of device manufacturers bringing multi-sensor technologies into the market. And this is really important because it allows us to start to assess more complex symptoms. So things like depression, fatigue, anxiety, as well as get better at measuring sort of things that we've already been measuring for a while, like sleep and physical activity, because these technologies allow us to access or measure more of the context of where those behaviors and how those behaviors are happening. And that helps us make more and more fine insights and make more meaningful comparisons over time. And really, as I say, we're just looking to build on a lot of the change that happened during the COVID pandemic. And, a lot of companies invested very heavily into remote monitoring and remote trials generally. And so we're looking to keep building on that momentum, make sure that we keep pushing forward and keep maturing the available tools to sponsors, and make sure that they can build those chains of evidence.
Well, thank you very much, Ieuan, for speaking with us today. We really appreciate your time and insights.
Thanks so much for the invitation.
We look forward to learning more about VivoSense's work in developing and validating real-world digital clinical measures. Thank you all for joining us for this Xtalks Spotlight feature. We hope you enjoyed the discussion.